that. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us today. In the interest of time, we can get started and hopefully a couple more people will join in progress. In case you haven't met me, my name is Maida Stange and I'm the program manager for NewsMatch. And I'm joined by Stephanie Schenkel, who's INN's director of network philanthropy. And today is really meant to be an open conversation about community matches. Any questions you might have, what has or has not worked for you in the past, how to jump in and get started, really whatever comes to mind. So that we'll go through the agenda. We can do just a obviously very quick round of introductions since it's a pretty small call. And then Stephanie and I will provide a basic overview of what a community match actually is, what the donor cycle looks like. And if you've secured your own matches in the past or have started to secure them this year, we'd love to hear about what's working for you, what challenges you're facing, and then we can just have a general discussion about anything that might be on your mind. So super small group, feel free to jump in with any questions as we're going through this. No need to wait, just feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. So if you, Danny and Kimberly, if you wouldn't mind just sharing who you are, where you're based, the newsroom you're representing, and any questions or challenges that you're hoping to have addressed when it comes to community matches today, that would be great. And then we can go from there.
Sure, I can go first.
Okay, great, Kimberly, thank you.
My name is Kimberly Spencer. I am with Capital B News. I am located in just outside of Denver. And I think the challenge, I've done NewsMatch in the past, but I've been with like established organizations. So we already had like a pretty deep bench of people that we could reach out to. Capital B, we're brand new. We launched in January. So I think just figuring out, especially as a national organization that's, dispersed, like figuring out where to even start with matches is probably the biggest challenge I'm having right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And where did you come from before you joined Capital B? You mentioned that you had.
Yep, I was at Chalkbeat.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, sounds good. And then we'll throw to Danny.
I'm Danny Stusser, and I live in Olympia, Washington. Olympia is one of 3 cities and a county that we cover with our publication called The Jolt, the Journal of Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater. The original name was going to be Thurston Digest because we want to cover the whole county. But a friend of mine whacked me with a stick and said, "Don't you dare call it Thurston Digest, come up with something better." So we became The Jolt.
I love The Jolt. I love the name Jolt.
It's a big name to live up to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess if I were to whine about my challenges, it would be that nobody cares about Thurston County except people here in the county, which means we've got to make it happen from here and not even imagine we'll get a lot of support nationally outside of NewsMatch. My second, so I don't know exactly who to identify. I can name maybe 5 people out of our list that I think have the capacity to be major donors. I'm sure that I'm wrong, but I don't know how to get to them. The second thing is, once I get to them, I'm not sure how to demonstrate our impact. I don't have a portfolio. I don't have a presentation. I can't say, here's why you should write us a check for $5,000 a year for 3 years, or 10,000 or 20,000. It's in there somewhere. So I got to figure out how to do this, or maybe you can help me so I don't have to figure it out.
Well, we're going to figure it out together. And it is interesting that both of you are representing such different organizations. Like your scale is so different, your coverage is so different, but the challenge remains the same, right? It's identifying people who can kind of step up to make those major gifts and support you in a big way. So I think this should be a pretty interesting conversation. Great. Well, thank you for that. And then Stephanie, do you want to jump in and just introduce yourself and give a little bit of background?
Yes, that'd be great. I'm Stephanie Schenkel. I'm the Network Philanthropy Director for INN, and My job is really to help support you through the challenge of fundraising. As some of you are newer newsrooms, as you mentioned, some are more experienced newsrooms, but still need support in different areas. We have many, many resources, some of which you'll see Maida will email you after, but also we have opportunity for one-on-one office hours in which I can help you as you grapple with some of these issues and kind of look to overcome all the hurdles that exist with fundraising. So I'm excited to work with you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And then, so I'm actually going to kind of skim through the presentation itself because Danny heard it last week and Kimberly, you've participated before. So a lot of kind of the rudimentary details, I think you guys are beyond. So we'll start with just, everybody on this call knows what a matching gift campaign is. It's a campaign in which a funder or funders pledge to match donations that are made by individuals. So NewsMatch offers that match for organizations that have operating expenses under $1 million. And what we've seen is in many cases, newsrooms are going above and beyond what's provided by NewsMatch in order to secure their own matches independently, which is where this community match concept comes in. So this looks like pitching major donors, your boards, foundations, local businesses, and growing your pool of matching funds for your year-end campaign. So as you can see in this chart here, while the funds provided by NewsMatch have remained relatively consistent year over year, community matches secured by newsrooms have continued to grow. And last year we saw it grow pretty significantly. It went from like 300 local match funders in 2020 to over 900 last year, which is pretty impressive. So securing these matches is a way to enhance your organization's sustainability and revenue growth opportunities. So some examples of how this works. Again, this should be pretty familiar. They can come from a variety of sources, including your board, a major donor, a local foundation, or it can be a collective gift made by a group of supporters or a local business. And Danny, to me, this feels like it might be a good opportunity for Joel because while you said you were able to identify maybe a couple of people who could be major donors, this might be a good opportunity to have people who might be mid-level donors all contribute to this matching pot. So you can see this example from Civil Beat where they had kind of multiple people contribute to this fund and then fundraise against that to try and make $25,000. Welcome, Megan. If you want to drop just a little bit of information about yourself, who you're representing, any questions you have about community matches in the chat, that would be great. So during the campaign itself, these community matches can be utilized in various ways. So you can use them to increase your overall match cap. So instead of, fundraising against the $10,000, which is just an example, but $10,000 match cap provided by NewsMatch, if you secure $5,000 additional dollars in community matches, then you can, ask your audience to step up and contribute $15,000 to make both those matches. You can also increase your multiplier of donations. So this is a great way to incentivize individual donors by saying, when you give now, your gift is actually tripled. It's matched by NewsMatch as well as this, collection of community matches that we have secured. Another option that is a little bit less popular, but I think is super interesting is matching donations with a contribution to another cause. So in this example, there you go. In this example from Sahan Journal in Minnesota, Sahan offered to provide free meals or meals to families in need for every monthly gift they received, which is a really good way to spread the love. So I'm going to pause here for a minute and see if Kimberly, I can put you on the spot and see if and when you've secured local matches in the past, which I believe Chalky has, how you employed that during your NewsMatch campaign.
Yeah, we did exactly what you said. We So Chalkbeat has multiple locations. So each market owner was responsible for finding at least one local match. I had it easy because I live in Colorado and we have lots of organizations that support the work that we do, and they have been matches year over year. So being able to get 3 different matches to be able to say it's tripled, maybe I'm trying to think. The last time I did NewsMatch for Chalkbeat, I think we were able to quadruple people's donation.
Love
And
it.
we were able to kind of take, we were able to reach out to people and ask them, instead of just making their annual donation, could we use that donation as part of the match pool, which worked really well for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Danny and Megan, do you have any like preliminary ideas about what this might look like if you were to utilize those funds during your NewsMatch campaign? No worries if not, just giving you kind of the space to brainstorm here.
You mean matching with a second nonprofit organization?
Yeah, well, do you envision raising the match cap? Do you think that multiplier option that Kimberly just discussed would be good for like enticing to your audience?
I think that before November 1st, I want to attract at least $50,000 in additional donations, so I can say every dollar you give is tripled or quadrupled.
Amazing. Yeah.
I would love to do that. It's just intimidating a bit, I guess. I'm still, and I don't know if this was already discussed. I had to log in late, but kind of confused of, when to start talking to people about this.
Okay, great question, Megan. I would say there's really, you really can't start the conversations early enough. And Stephanie's going to kind of take us through that donor cycle so you can get a better idea of kind of the steps that go into it. But glad that you're joining us today to kind of get that information and start those conversations, definitely. So with that, I will pass it over to Stephanie, who can go through those steps, and then we can pause there and kind of take another step back to look at where we could use a little bit more information.
Okay, so hi everyone. We have 4 steps, 4 key steps in the process of securing your donor matches. So the first is to start to, and you can be doing this now really, search for prospects, identify who you have currently in your caseload or who you can add to that caseload. Who in your community has a connection to your mission, and then also has capacity to give to you. So you can start to look at building lists. We have services around things like wealth screening that can help with that. And I'm happy to talk to you about that. If that's of interest to you. We can also work with you to help, we call qualify your list or tier your list based on the donor's capacity to give. And that comes from the wealth screening data that we can help provide to you. And then once you have that list, you can start to say to yourself, who is in my highest tier essentially, and focus really heavily on getting out to do substantive meetings with them. So face-to-face meetings or Zoom meetings are best with the highest tier, highest capacity donors. And then in your folks who are not in that top percentage, and that's kind of up to you what your percentage is that you use, but let's say it's your top 20% or whatever you decide, then you can start to determine what are some of the methods that you can use to still get to them with more mass kind of communications, appeals, letters, newsletters, e-blasts, things like that, that will communicate your message and also the nuts and bolts of your campaign without taking up the resources. You are the resource essentially in engaging in one-on-ones with all of them. So that's the first step. And then it's really about cultivating and deepening your relationship with your donors. Again, this would be your highest level donors primarily, looking at what kind of connections you have with them and how you can build those relationships based on the mission of your organization. And then it's making an ask, which we're going to talk about a little bit next, and offering a specific opportunity for someone to give to your newsroom. And that's sometimes we overlook the step 3, which is making the ask. And some people are nervous about making the ask, but we want to make sure that we are doing it, because one of the basic fundraising principles is that most people don't give because they're not asked. So that's step 3. And then 4 is the stewardship, which really happens throughout. And that's showing your appreciation in terms of it could be a acknowledgement letter, which we have in our resource, in our list of resources. We can help to, you could then tailor an acknowledgement letter that we already have written. It could be picking up the phone and calling donors, or acknowledging them on your website, or having board members write individual notes. So anything that really helps that donor feel that they were appreciated for giving. So any questions on these 4 steps?
Before we get to that, I'm actually going to pause us here for a second. Kimberly and Danny kind of, before you joined, Megan, they kind of identified that the identification of potential major donors is kind of a hurdle that they're facing for different reasons, but it is something that they're both facing. So I guess I would like to pose the same question to you. Are there any potential major donors that you've already identified as opportunities to reach out to, or are you still kind of exploring that? Where do you stand there, so that we can kind of get a feel for where everybody is at?
Great. Thanks, Maida.
Yeah, I'd say I'm right there with them, just in that stage of identification. I was talking with a potential sponsor a few weeks ago, and I mentioned, this opportunity. And I was just talking with my team to come up with some sort of language that's, easy to communicate with people, so that once we do identify them, we can more easily, break the ice with us.
Great. And we have some templated outreach resources that might be of value to you in that vein, just to kind of help you provide your value proposition and make it clear kind of what you're looking for. So we can certainly share those with you so that you have something kind of jump off from. So hopefully that resource will be of assistance to you. I'm gonna.
That sounds great.
Okay, great. I'm also going, Stephanie, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot, and I'm going to ask a question on behalf of Kimberly, because I think that this is a question that I share as well. So you've identified these these opportunities through INN for wealth screening and kind of segmenting out the donors that you already have. What recommendations might you have for organizations who don't necessarily have a strong list to start from, or are truly prospecting? Where do you, what would you recommend?
And that's a lot of our newsrooms. So you're I think that's something that we should discuss. Is that the case? Just so I understand, is that, Danny, I know we talked, so I know that's sort of the case for you. Kimberly and Megan, is that sort of the case for you, or are you more thinking, I have a list, what do I do with it? Just so I understand where we're all kind of starting from.
For me, it's definitely prospecting. We
Okay.
do not have, we have a list, but the way it was set up, we didn't capture addresses. So it's a lot of work to go in and put that in. I mean, we're going to do it because we want to do a wealth screening, but we have to go in and find the addresses. So really
Okay.
it is like just starting from scratch.
Okay. And I know, Kimberly, I was just actually like Googling all of you and your organization. So I know you have a lot of experience in development, but are new to this particular organization. So that's pretty much a challenge. And Megan, are you sort of in the same boat with needing to build that list up?
Yes, definitely. We did a
Okay.
wealth screening. I think I mentioned this the last time I met with you guys, or last time we did a webinar. We did a wealth screening last year, but I never really understood how to
Yeah.
leverage it.
Okay.
So I have that, but yeah, other than that, I'm still working on the list.
Okay. So first I'll say that if the time we have today isn't enough, Megan, Kimber, all three of you really feel free to set up time with me. Maida's going to put a link in the chat after with office hours information, because I want to spend time with you if I can, going through steps that you can take to develop your lists, make your lists more robust, as you mentioned, Kimberly, like how to get those addresses in there, for example, so you can do a wealth screening, or in your case, Megan, what do you do once you have the wealth screening? So I think, first of all, I think your board can be really critical in this phase, as far as, so once you have pulled a list together, and that requires, as Kimberly mentioned, quite a bit of legwork up front, because it could be having us perform a wealth screening for you, and then you're qualifying the donors and sorting them by tier and their capacity and affinity to you. So there's some legwork to do there. But then once you have a list, we want to think about how to approach those donors, so we can come up with plans to do that. But building the list is a challenge. I think, Kimberly, I wondered in your case what your staffing looks like and your capacity around being able to collect all those addresses.
Well, I mean, we're a team of two. We do have a little bit of admin support, but that's pretty much focused on, just our everyday, like, major donor stuff and grants and all of those things.
Yeah.
So we don't have a whole lot of capacity. So it will probably, and I had to do this at Chalkbeat because we ran into the same issue.
Yeah.
Like, people aren't requiring the address when they check out in Stripe. So we had to go in and like search by email address, and lots of times that would come up, and it would pull the person, but it takes a really long time.
Okay. And how many, did I already ask you how many roughly you had?
I feel like, I mean, I know our like subscriber list, I want to, I like 3,000 plus. And it might be significantly more than that. I'm usually focused on like those that have donated in the past.
Exactly.
But I would love to like run the entire list, because I know there's probably like gold in there, and we just need to find it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's like almost a good problem to have compared to some of our other newsrooms, Kimberly, because you have so many on your list. But getting them into the wealth screening is a challenge with, like you said, without the addresses. If you have maybe opportunity to consult that work out, if you don't have capacity, it's probably worthwhile. But if you have like I said, if you have the funds to do so, but another way, like, I know you already know this, but just for like Megan and Danny, we're a little bit newer to it, perhaps, is what Kimberly alluded to. In addition to your wealth screening, you also have your existing donors. Well, Danny, you're still building yours, and Megan too. But I know once you have a critical mass of them, you can also do that same sorting by their past gift, and that gives you at least a sense for how they contributed in the past, but it doesn't give you the full picture of what their capacity is. Depending on how big your list is, Kimberly's is too big to do this, but if you have a smaller list and you're still building it, somebody on your team, your staff, board, or a consultant may just also manually go through and try to tier them in such a way that you would be able to then approach them later. It's really talking to your board about who knows whom and kind of getting a feel for who's on your list. But those are some recommendations that I have. I'll stop talking and I'll turn it over to you for a question.
Can I ask a clarifying question, please?
Mhm.
Okay. Is there a process for taking our mailing list, which is different from our donor list,
Yeah.
but they pretty much overlap, and reverse engineering that you need their mailing addresses to do the wealth screening?
Mhm. But do you have the mailing addresses, Danny?
No. I have
No.
email addresses. I might have mail addresses for 25 people.
Yeah, I know. This is the challenge. So how many do you have on your overall like audience list?
Our subscriber list just busted through 3,000.
Yep. Okay. So you're like in a similar boat.
We're almost the same size as Kimberly, I think.
Yeah.
But it's taken us 27 months to build it.
Yeah. So, okay, a couple things. One is you can do a few things concurrently. One is to try to reach out through email or to find a consultant or a volunteer who might help you to get their addresses, right? So you can get them on the wealth screening. In the meantime, though, you can still ask them for money or email. So you can still send out appeals, and you should still leverage that list even without the addresses. The addresses are a pain in a way because the purpose of having those through the wealth screening is like to verify who the individual is and then look at their residences and their assets and things like that. But it doesn't mean that you can't start asking them and sending them appeals in the meantime. And definitely through NewsMatch with the resources that Meta has. And then over time, hopefully the best time to approach the addresses is like as soon as possible, because the more people you get on your list without addresses, then it's going to become more and more cumbersome. So I would say that if there's any way you can find a resource to start collecting addresses, that's really great. But in the meantime, you can also, you would consider them like a tier. Like I always think of it as like tiers 1, 2, 3, and 4, like a tier 4.
What about,
just send
we have the zip code. Does that make a difference?
them.
Can't the wealth screening databases look with name and zip code?
So you have to have their address to do like the full wealth screening. The zip code is an interest. That's a whole nother thing that's interesting, because you can start to look at, like, you can on your own start to look at higher wealth concentrated areas, which doesn't always tell you the whole picture. But I know certain zip codes may have higher.
No, I meant, can the system match a name with a zip code? And if it's an unusual enough name.
No, they do need your address for that. Otherwise it spits it back out.
I mean, some people won't even give us their first name. They just use some kind of code name.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
talking about the Russian bots. I'm
Right. Yeah, I know. And that'll probably be the case no matter what, even once you start to, like, if you got 25%, you know what I mean? If you got, or 30%, like if you each, Kimberly and Danny, if you each could collect 500 to 1,000 addresses out of the 3,000, like, to me, that's a win. Because some people are not going to want to share that information, and nor will they want to donate, right? And that's okay. But I think the best, to the best of your ability, trying to collect them it will behoove you, and as far as doing a wealth screening, because it does just spit it, like don't have all of the information, it won't perform the wealth screening. I mean, you can go ahead and Google somebody and try to get as much information, which I do all the time, and try to get as much information on them as you possibly can, right? But it depends on like their name and how common it is and all of those things that,
I don't know that I have the staff or the time or the money to do what you're talking about. I think the most hopeful thing you said is that I could show my list to the board members and say,
yeah,
look at these email addresses, look at these names, and tell me if you know any of these people and what you think their capacity is.
yeah, absolutely. I always did that. Like that's like the first step I've always taken, is to share lists with board members. And like sometimes I've even had board meetings that are specifically devoted to it, because depending on your board, like have had board members that you're like, okay, here's the list, and they never look at it. So you can do it on the spot, like with them even. But I think that's probably your best bet, is like any constituents that you have within your organization, board members, volunteers, anybody that you know, trying to share that list to start to network with them. That is going to go a long way. And if you have grants already, then perhaps talking to some of the staff, like the program officers at the foundations, to ask them, do they have any recommendations of other funders who look like them, who might be willing to fund you? Also looking at organizations that are like either in your community, looking at their funders, right? I always look at other people's lists, or in like the case of Kimberly was at Chalkbeat in the past, like looking at other education kind of related organizations who funded them. Those are other ways to get lists. But I don't think your issue is unique at all, Danny, in not having the resources, and B, not being overwhelmed by the prospect of doing a wealth screening. But it's not the only way to build your donor base is through a wealth screening. It really isn't. I think your board is probably your best bet. In your case, how many board members do you have?
5.5. We have 5 who are active and 1 who I'd like to kick off the board.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I would definitely. And do they have fundraising capacity, any of them? Or are they mostly journalists?
No, they're worse than journalists. They're former state workers.
Former state workers. Okay.
But some of them have good connections with people who have money. We have a couple of former board members that might be able to help us, and I've got 4 candidates to join the board.
Oh, good.
The board needs to pick up.
Yep.
And hopefully the new ones will put the old ones to shame.
Exactly. Yeah, I would bring it to all of those people you just named. Bring the list, and you'll start to get donors, and then you're going to feel that it does sort of take off once you have a few. Then you start talking to people that they know and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I feel a lot of pressure to get $25,000 donors in 2 months. I don't know if it's going to work that way. Probably not.
No, probably not. And I don't know if the pressure is helpful at all for you, but it's that's not an expectation by any means, that we would not expect that to happen.
Well, I know it's not good to go to a donor with pressure, but I think I'm going to try to leverage NewsMatch as a way to motivate people to act more quickly than they otherwise might.
Yeah, exactly. I would do that. And I think maybe urgency, rather than thinking about it as pressure, just maybe the urgency of, and remember, I think I've had this in my notes, but I forgot to say it, that you're not asking for money for yourself. right? You're asking for money for something that's really important, and to your donors is probably important to them as well. So I think the NewsMatch is exactly that, Danny. It's intended to create urgency around and really create a campaign for you. But it's not, we don't expect you to bring in, as a new organization, $25,000 right off the bat. Where we had that where is that? At the end, there's a gift chart,
Yeah.
which I thought was pretty helpful. And then we can go through practicing the script if we have.
So this breakout is like not the be all end all, but it's meant to kind of demonstrate what newsrooms in certain categories were able to secure in community matches in 2021. Just because I know that it can sometimes be a challenge to establish a benchmark or like know even what is reasonable to get started with. Kimberly and Megan, I know that you've gone through this before, but this kind of like helps you visualize, you know, what other organizations around your size or with your coverage areas might be able to secure. So you can see that it's pretty disparate, and a large proportion of the newsrooms who participate don't even secure local matches, like a lot, or community matches. A lot of organizations, you know, utilize NewsMatch for a cycle or two in order to build out their lists and really start to establish that relationship with donors that they can then leverage in future years to generate more major donations.
One question I had for this group too, and we can go into the script exercise, but I also hearing some reticence, which is totally normal, around this. And I'm wondering if you have had discussions with your board around what your fundraising goals look like, both for this campaign and just, you know, in your annual budget sort of thing, because that helps me to understand where the pressure maybe is coming from, whether it's imposed on you or if it's self-imposed because you're just the kind of person that wants to raise as much as you can. But what are your revenue goals look like for your organizations? Megan, did you want to go?
Sure. And for the board, that's actually another big thing on our plate. We're still trying to build our board. We only have one board member who is not, you know, the staff. So, because we're volunteer staff at this point, which is another reason why we want to build the board, so we don't have to be volunteer anymore.
Right.
Makes sense. Yes. And he hasn't been super helpful with fundraising, so we're really working toward that. At this point, we haven't really set a goal for a local match. We definitely want to try to meet whatever the NewsMatch cap is this year. That will absolutely be, that's what we did last year. We had that as our goal.
Okay, great.
But I said in the chat, I don't know if this helps, Danny, but we leveraged some of the information and tools that NewsMatch gave us last year, and we did another match campaign in the spring. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be like the only one you do.
That's interesting. We didn't do much in the spring other than on National Press Freedom Day. I wrote an editorial and we got, I think, 7 new donors because good. I asked for them there. But last year we wanted to meet the NewsMatch, the match, and we beat it a little bit, and that was very helpful to us. We're still using some of those funds because we spread them out through the year. I guess something's bothering me, and I'll blurt it out.
Please do.
The smart guys in this business, men and women both, the smart guys went out before they launched and raised $1 million or $3 million or $500,000. And they said, here's what we're trying to do. Will you support it? And the dream not the proof. The dream got them enough money to start newsrooms with 3 to 20 people.
Yeah.
I don't understand this chart because, I mean, I thought we did piss poor last year because we only raised $5,000 in matching funds. And we only raised like $37,000 matching everything. But
How much,
I still,
Danny,
I mean,
what's your budget again? You might have told us last time, but
$300,000 is what we're trying to have as a budget, half of which would come from philanthropy and the other 100,000 from advertising and 50,000 from unknown fantasy money.
okay. And where do grants fall in to this?
Grants would be the unknown fantasy money, unless they're local grants from local foundations, which would count very happily into the $150,000 of philanthropy we're trying to raise.
Yep. Okay. And did that figure come from, you have a staff in mind that you'd like to build?
That's right. Plus, there's this rough idea that a county of 300,000 people ought to be able to support a nonprofit newsroom at the level of $1 per capita.
Yeah, that I think, I mean, I do think that makes sense over time. I think that, you know, you are in a community that does have the capacity, right? So maybe.
I mean, we're in a company town, and the company is the state government.
Yeah.
We don't have a very many large businesses.
Yeah. Yep. So maybe thinking about your business sponsorship goal. I mean, that's ambitious, right? And you had $100,000, you said, and
I think that a good target for us is to raise 30,000 in small contributions.
Yep.
Small meaning up to $1,000.
yeah.
And then 120,000 in contributions from individuals and businesses that have the capacity to write us a check and believe in lower D democracy.
Okay.
But I could be wrong. I don't know. I mean, I think it could be larger than that, but not in the first year.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Megan said, I'm seeing, waiting for her to type it.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so we asked that people kind of bucket out where they're securing these matches, and major funders and individual philanthropists were, you know, the most used funding source for those local matches. I think that seeking corporate sponsors still makes sense. Like, this is, again, just to provide an idea, just to provide some insight into how other newsrooms went about this. But if you have relationships with, you know, people in these businesses or at these corporations that you can leverage in order to secure those matches, this is not meant to dissuade you from pursuing corporate sponsors for those matches at all. I think that—
is there a difference between a corporate sponsor and a major gift individual philanthropist?
I mean, it would be like Ford or GM offering a match as opposed to Maida Stangy, right? So you're kind of, I think that the opportunities that exist for newsrooms, because securing these matches is so relationship based, that's why major funders is kind of the number one source, but that should not preclude you from going out and, you know, poaching those sponsors for your matches. Do you have anybody in mind already, Megan, that you're kind of looking at in terms of approaching? Like, are there corporations that align with your mission or seem invested in the work you do already?
Yeah, we have some relationships that we've been developing with corporate sponsors. Last year we had a lot of luck with the sponsors, and I was told they have to be locally based businesses, which they were, in order to qualify. But that worked really well for us last year. So we're hoping, and you know, I'm thinking, because of all the communication going out whenever you get a matching donor, it's a lot more visibility for the businesses, which should make it easier to sell, I'd imagine.
Yeah, definitely. And incentivizes their giving because they're getting this recognition, and, you know, their names in front of your audience, which is great. And then the other, it sounds like, you know, you have those relationships that hopefully you've continued to steward over the year, especially if you had a spring campaign. Like, it sounds like you kind of had multiple touch points then that you kind of leverage for this upcoming campaign. And I had another thought, but it has completely left my mind. So leave it at that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you both kind of you were talking a little bit about the differences between like corporate and individual. So generally, like, as you get larger, the auditors will require you to separate those out in your budget. So it would usually be individual gifts, corporate gifts, foundation gifts, and then earned income. Those, you know, those are generally, so they are distinct in that way. And even if you go after a foundation within a corporation, that would fall under foundations because of their tax status. So that, I mean, that's one. So they do, in the future, it will matter to you. For now, get whatever you can get. And, you know.
I have another question. The major funder I mentioned that we had in the spring that we based our spring campaign on, is it okay to go back to that person for this campaign, or is that too soon? Like, how do you know?
How much did they give, first of all, Megan?
They gave $6,000.
Okay. So I would definitely go back to them and let them know that there is an opportunity for, well, what is your fiscal year, by the way? That's an important
It
question.
follows the calendar year.
Okay. So you may go back to them and say, we are very grateful for this $6,000 gift. Here's what it did for us, our organization, and how we used it. We are now embarking on this campaign called NewsMatch, and we're so fortunate to have the opportunity to match dollars. Would you be willing to contribute on top of your $6,000 that has gone to this fiscal year, maybe an additional $2,000 gift, and we'll be able to match that as a $4,000 gift? I would definitely go back to them, but just with a lot of gratitude for what they've already done. And if they say no, then you say, you know what, we really appreciate your gift, and we look forward to having more conversations in the next fiscal year or calendar year in your case. But I think it's always worth asking.
Okay.
I don't think it will offend them. I think it's definitely worth asking them for sure. Because you have a good reason to be asking, because this match has arisen as an opportunity for your organization.
Right. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yep.
I would also say that you've already kind of started applying that idea of going back to your audience multiple times to ask for money. So like, take into account that, you know, you also can do more than one campaign a year and be generating, you know, those fundraising opportunities, you know, kind of throughout the course of the year in order to make sure you're really leveraging your audience and asking them for what you need in order to sustain your organization. So you're already on the right track in having a spring campaign and pursuing that, you know, outside of that year-end giving cycle, but just wanted to flag that as well.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question about approach. Two questions. One, I heard an aphorism once that stuck with me, and it was simply this: if you're looking for money, ask for advice. And if you're looking for advice, ask for money. And in general, that means I go out and ask for advice.
Yeah.
I ask for introductions. Is that overused? I mean, does that mean they can hear you a mile away if you say, I'd like to ask you for some advice?
No, I think that's, I think it's okay to ask for input, I mean, advice or input, I would call it, on your program, as long as you really want the input. I mean, you definitely don't want to create a situation where donors have too much involvement in your programming, especially as journalists. Like, I know how important that is to you, but I think that if you really want the input and you're open to the input, that's a good way to get the conversation rolling, right? And to build those relationships. And then you get a sense for what your donors want, right? And then you can have a conversation about what's feasible.
Well, I don't leave it that open. I don't say I'm looking for input about what we should cover. I mean, I would, but I don't in those conversations. I ask for advice about, I tell them we're looking to raise money, and I get more specific and I tell the story and I say, are there some people that you might introduce?
Advice in that way. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Are there some people?
Yeah, that, I mean, that,
referrals before I ask for money.
yes, like I had in my last position, I was able to build like an entire environmental reporting program based on one individual who happened to have a family foundation, who then referred me to two other foundations they had an environmental cohort in the state, and they then built, and we were able to build in that way because they offered a suggestion for who else I might be able to go to fund environmental work in our community. So I think that type of advice, like, for sure, always ask. And your community foundation, ask them if they have suggestions, and then look also at, like I said, earlier in the conversation, look at other organizations within your community and other organizations doing similar work as yours, and at their lists, and to the extent that you can. Their foundations. It's harder sometimes to get individuals, but sometimes you can through their annual report.
Okay.
And then you have like something to work off of.
One more question would be, we've been offered the opportunity to buy the local PBS list, the list of donors in our zip codes who give money to PBS. Seems to me that they would be the most logical match for us. Is there, I don't know how many of those people are on our list already. I don't know what to do with that opportunity.
Does the list have addresses? Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
I mean, I don't know how much they're offering, but I would say that could really get you started. Those people have an interest, a political interest, right? Generally.
Well, maybe political, but it could just be they want to fund the entertainment shows. I mean, a lot of what's on PBS is not news or analysis or politics. It's
right.
Kids shows and nature.
Yeah.
I like nature better than news.
You like what better than news?
I like nature better than news if I want to relax.
Yeah. I mean, they're not all going to be an exact fit, but yes, I think it might be worth your, depending on how much it costs.
Okay.
So
I think everybody has that opportunity. I'm sorry, Maida, to interrupt you.
Oh, you're totally fine. I just wanted to jump in and say, I want to be mindful of time. We have reached 2 o'clock. So I wanted to thank you both for being so open and forthcoming about, going through the process, what questions you had. Our doors, Stephanie and my doors, are always open to discuss this further. I will follow up with ways to get in touch with us. Megan, I will also reach out to you and set up some time between you, me, and Stephanie to kind of talk about that wealth screening that you did previously and how you can best work with that moving forward, since you've already taken that first step, and we can go through that. So thank you so much for your time today, and we will, be in contact shortly.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
So much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.